I'm Heather Kelly, KSL News Radio 102.7 FM and 1160 AM, Utah's news, traffic, weather, and BYU Cougar Station.
The Doug Wright Show, where Utah news breaks on KSL News Radio 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
I was intrigued the other day by a letter that I read. It was actually placed as an open letter advertisement within the pages of, I saw the Washington Post, and it said, "Dear President Donald Trump and honorable members of Congress." And it starts today, March 20th. Iranians are celebrating the Persian New Year, an ancient ceremony that ushers in the spring and marks the rebirth of life. And there are some interesting quotes from the president himself here, and right in the center is this elevated part of the text: "An Iran war is a gift to Iran's supreme leader." And as I found out a little bit more about this open letter to the president and members of Congress, I found that a friend of mine, Khosrow Semnani, was involved. And Iran has been somewhat of a constant topic. Welcome to the program, and tell us what motivated you and the others involved in this to place this ad aimed at the president and Congress.
Good morning, Doug. I hope you're doing well and enjoying the second day of the spring, and your family is doing good. Well, let me just briefly tell you, as you know, I've always been concerned about the Iran situation and the conflict that exists between Iran regime and America, and really the reason was I've been kind of monitoring the situation in Iran and as well as the American politics, and I hear from time to time that there could be a potential war between U.S. and Iran, and that really is not a comfortable thing to think about.
You quoted the president who said the Iranian regime, the regime's longest suffering victims are its own people. Iran has a rich history and culture, but the people of Iran have endured hardship and despair under their leaders, reckless pursuit of conflict and terror. And then the letter goes on to say you concluded with a prayer for the, quote, "day when the Iranian people have the just and righteous government they deserve." Let me get back to this statement that again is highlighted in this letter. "An Iran war is a gift to Iran's supreme leader." If this escalates, and if the tensions between the United States of America and some of our allies and Iran, if this escalates and even does come to war, how does that play into the advantage of the hardliners within Iran and the leadership right now?
Well, for some of the people who are keeping an eye on what's happening in Iran, like myself, we are witnessing quite a bit of dissension in Iran and split among the ruling regime and people like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was a previous president of Iran, and Mousavi and Khosrow B, who would have been in house arrest and so on, and their supporters and so on. There is quite a bit of dissension going on, and the fact of the matter is, in more than one way, the regime has completely failed. They're just staying in power because of the brute force. But in terms of running a country that failed, the economy is in a complete shambles in spite of the lifting of the sanction, has had very little effect. The violation of human rights continues. The inflation, in fact, since in the last, I would say, less than 7 months, is running somewhere around 30%. The dollar has gone up as compared to Rial in Iran. So the inflation is just going out of control, has been out of control. Mm-hmm. So the country is on the verge of change. The question is how that change is going to come about. And that's why if there is a military attack by the United States, who they call, after that day, but the regime calls, a great Satan, that would give them the justification, the regime justification, like saying, we told you, and it gives them the power that they have begun to lose. And that would coalesce the people from not having any other alternative to basically rally around the existing corrupt government and give them another 20 years of shelf life, excuse me. And so what I'm saying is a war with Iran is the worst thing we can do because the government is failing today.
We're talking with Khosrow Semnani, who has been in this country and is an American citizen and has been here since the late teens, if I'm remembering correctly, Khoz, and very prominent in Utah business circles. And in this letter, it says the nuclear deal is not a justification for the appeasement of a theocracy that degrades religion to celebrate tyranny and terror, plunder and corruption and division and death. At the same time, as Iranian Americans, we are strongly opposed to an Iran war that can escalate into a regional or world war. What is the proper path? I think many of us are surprised. You and I have talked about this, I don't know how many times, Khoz, that the Iranian people, this is just a cradle of civilization and the amazing things that have been introduced to the world out of the Persian, Iranian background and culture and time, one of the oldest societies on the face of the earth. Many of us are surprised that this theocracy, this regime, this oppression continues to this day. How do we expedite it coming to an end and having the Iranian people blossom again?
I think, Iranian people, as you pointed out, they're desperately trying to find a way and trying to come up with a solution for this theocracy that it has completely failed and it lives by force on a day-to-day basis. The solution really is to give Iranian people the moral support, and U.S. historically has been able to do that in Iran in more than one way when they wanted to. And in the other countries, if you look at what has happened in Eastern Europe, when Mr. Reagan, pushed the Soviets for allowing the Eastern Europe basically become a set of democratic countries back in the 80s, really there was no war. There were no war. And it was just a matter of what you may call as the U.S. soft power. And U.S. soft power has been effective around the world, and in my opinion can be effective for Iranian people as well. And in 2009, we had the opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, we didn't, but the people, 1.5 million people that they came out then, they are still there. They're still searching for opportunity to change the regime. And I think Mr. Trump would be well served, and the U.S. would be well served, if the policy would be to support the people who want to change in Iran by the means that are non-violent, and Iranian people will make the change themselves.
Since this very significant letter that was very prominently placed in the papers, what has been the response? Khoz, have you heard back directly or indirectly from any of the members of Congress or from the president himself?
Well, I have not heard from the president yet. I've heard from my friend Congressman Chris Stewart, and we are hoping that we can hear from the president or some members of the Congress in the near future. One other person that is not necessarily related to this ad that we took out is Senator Lee, who has also been very much of an opponent of the war in the Middle East, especially in Yemen, and I really admire his thinking that he has stood for that and tried to minimize the devastation and the atrocities in Yemen, because the region right now is not very stable, and if there's another military conflict between the U.S. and Iran, that would really make the regions that much worse. So, no, I've not heard anything specific yet.
Well, it's interesting. Senator Lee, he and I had a chat day before yesterday, and he was taking some grief in the Wall Street Journal. He and Senator Sanders, and there was one other Democratic senator, I can't recall the name right now, from Connecticut, I believe, that because of their thoughts on trying to avoid these types of conflict, boy, the Wall Street Journal called him out. It really surprised me, and I know it. I think it really caught Senator Lee off guard.
Well, there are clearly very many opinions here, and everybody, they believe they have the ultimate solution. But as long as the solution that they're coming up, ideas they're coming up, are not military, they are not causing more and more devastation for the people in the region, I think they should be considered. But you look at what has happened to the Iraq and U.S. war since 2003, it's been lose-lose situation. U.S. has lost 4,400 soldiers, and hundreds of thousands of Iraqis have died. Millions have been displaced. Afghanistan the same way. So as long as they're not non-military solution, they should be considered. But military solution, I think this is not something that U.S. would win or the people in the region would win. There is no upside to it, unfortunately.
I was touched by the end of this letter that was a call for the President and members of Congress to join us in celebrating the Persian New Year by standing with the Iranian people and demanding that Iran's tyrants and their systematic violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights would cease. Then join us in calling for an end to the regime's systematic assaults on the liberties of the Iranian people, press, parliament, and universities, and went on to enumerate even more. Join us in calling for the release of all political prisoners, including American citizens, and the closure of the Evin prison. And finally, join us in celebrating the Persian New Year by lending moral support to millions of Iranians who last December called for the abolition of the office of Iran's supreme leader, an end to the clerical despotism, and the establishment of a constitution and a secular government that reflects the sovereignty and protects the interests of the Iranian people. Kaz, I will be most interested to see what comes of this. I've so appreciated our conversations now over not just many years, but even decades. I appreciate your friendship, and I've appreciated your insights into this. I think it gives us all a little different and a refreshing perspective.
Well, thank you very much. I've got, I want to take this opportunity as well for your help and raising this issue with the locals in Iran, in Utah. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Khosrow, thank you so much for joining us. Khosrow Semnani with me here on the Doug Wright Show at KSL News Radio, referring to the advertisement, an open letter to the President and members of Congress, and the one that I caught happened to be in the Washington Post. 1049 at KSL News Radio. There is we've talked about a new political party here in the state of Utah. There are those that want a new national